A candle burns low in a drafty corridor. The flame bends and trembles as if it knows it will not last the night. Footsteps echo somewhere far away. Silk brushes against stone. A door closes softly. And in the endless maze of the Tudor court, a young woman walks quietly, almost unnoticed. Her name is Mary Boleyn. History would not remember her the way it remembered queens. Painters would not fill halls with her portraits. Writers would not argue for centuries about her fate. And yet, for a brief moment, one of the most powerful men in Europe could not look away from her. The court of King Henry VIII was a place of beauty and danger. Gold gleamed under candlelight. Musicians played soft melodies that drifted through open chambers. Perfume hung in the air, hiding the smell of damp stone and fear. It looked like a world of celebration. But beneath the glitter was something colder, ambition, sharp and silent like a blade hidden under velvet. Mary entered this world as many young noblewomen did. She had been raised to be polite, gentle, and careful. Her duty was simple: serve her family, obey expectations, and survive the quiet battles of court life. No one expected her to change history. No one expected her to be anything more than a daughter, a sister, a quiet figure in the background. And perhaps Mary believed that herself. She was not loud. She did not seek attention. Where others laughed brightly and spoke boldly, Mary listened. Where others chased favor, she moved gently, almost cautiously, as if she already sensed how fragile fortune could be. But sometimes it is the quiet ones who are noticed first. Henry was young then, strong and full of life. He laughed loudly. He rode hard. He loved music and poetry and admiration. Most of all, he loved to be desired. And when he saw Mary, something about her calm presence drew him in. She was not like the others. She did not try to impress him. She did not chase his attention. And perhaps that made her more intriguing. No one recorded the exact moment they first spoke. History rarely captures beginnings. It remembers endings, the dramatic ones, the violent ones, the unforgettable ones, but beginnings often pass in silence. Perhaps it was a glance across a crowded hall. Perhaps a polite conversation that lasted a little too long. Perhaps a shared laugh, quiet and unexpected. Whatever it was, the king began to notice her. At first, it was small things. A longer look, a smile meant only for her, a gentle word in passing. But in a place like the Tudor court, even the smallest attention from the king carried weight. People noticed. They always noticed. Mary may have felt both warmth and fear. The king's favor was powerful, but it was never safe. To be close to Henry was to stand near a fire, comforting at first, but always dangerous. Her family understood this better than anyone. The Boleyns were ambitious. They had worked for years to rise higher, to gain influence, to secure their place among England's powerful families. And now, through Mary, the king's attention was turning toward them. Smiles became sharper. Conversations grew more careful. Behind closed doors, plans were whispered. Mary may not have fully understood it at the time. She may have believed or wanted to believe that the king's affection was personal, not political. That she was seen as a woman, not as a stepping stone. But in royal courts, love and ambition rarely walk separate paths. As weeks passed, Henry's attention grew stronger. He sought her company more often. Gifts appeared small at first, then finer ones, tokens of favor wrapped in silk. People bowed a little lower when she passed. Doors opened more quickly. Servants watched her with new respect, but with favor came whispers. Nothing at court remained secret for long. Glances were exchanged behind fans. Voices lowered when Mary entered a room. Some envied her, others pitied her. A few understood what she herself was only beginning to realize, that to be the king's chosen companion was not a position of power but of uncertainty. Mary became his mistress, though not in the open, not in the proud way of a queen. She existed in the space between affection and silence, close enough to feel his warmth but never close enough to be secure. And yet she may have cared for him. That is the quiet tragedy history often forgets, that even in political games, real emotions can exist. A young woman can still feel hope. She can still believe that kindness means something, that affection is real, that promises might someday be spoken aloud instead of hidden in shadows. But the Tudor court was not kind to hope. Watching from nearby was Mary's sister, Anne Boleyn. Anne was different in ways that were not always visible at first. She was sharp, observant, patient. Where Mary trusted, Anne studied. Where Mary felt, Anne calculated. Anne saw everything. She saw how the king looked at her sister. She saw how quickly favor could rise and how quickly it could fall. And she learned a lesson that would shape her future: never give everything without demanding something in return. But Mary was not thinking about strategy. She was living day by day, moment by moment, in a world that glittered on the surface but trembled underneath. Nights at court were long. Music echoed through candlelit halls. Shadows moved across painted walls. And somewhere in quiet chambers far from the noise, Mary's story unfolded, not with dramatic speeches or grand decisions, but with small human moments. A touch of a hand, a look that lingered. A silence filled with unspoken meaning. She may have believed it would last, but nothing at court ever did. The candle in the corridor burns lower now. The flame flickers, struggling against the darkness. Wax pools at the base, slowly hardening, marking the passing of time. And somewhere in that flickering light, a question begins to form, a question that history itself cannot fully answer. Did Henry truly care for Mary Boleyn? Or was she simply the first step in a story that would lead to glory, betrayal, and blood? The flame trembles again, and the shadow on the wall fades, leaving only silence behind. A letter lies unopened on a wooden table. The wax seal is broken, but the words inside no longer matter. Outside, the court moves on as it always does, laughing, plotting, surviving. But for Mary Boleyn, something has shifted. At the court of Henry VIII, affection is never simple. Every smile carries a message. Every touch has a price. Even kindness can be a tool. Mary may have felt warmth in Henry's presence. She may have believed that in private moments he saw her as more than a passing comfort. But kings do not live in private worlds. Their hearts are tied to power, and power demands advantage. The Boleyn family understood this clearly. Mary's father and uncle watched closely as the king's visits became more frequent. They noticed the gifts, fine cloth, jewels, small tokens that signaled favor. They saw doors opening, invitations arriving, conversations growing warmer. Mary was no longer just a daughter, she was an opportunity. In quiet rooms, away from candlelight and music, decisions were made. If the king's attention could lift the Boleyn name higher, then it must be encouraged. Carefully, strategically, gently pushed forward. Mary may not have known how much was expected of her, or perhaps she did and carried that weight in silence. Henry came often in those early days. He was charming, playful, full of energy. He could make a woman feel chosen, special, seen. And Mary, still young, may have believed that what they shared was different from the king's past romances. But there was always a distance, a thin wall she could not cross. She was never promised a future, never offered security, never spoken of openly. She existed in shadow. Time moved forward as it always does. Seasons changed. The air grew colder, then warm again. And Mary gave birth to 2 children. Their tiny cries echoed in quiet rooms far from the bright halls of court. Whispers began almost immediately. Some said the children were the king's, others denied it. The truth remained uncertain. Henry himself never claimed them. He did not give them his name. He did not raise them in public view as his own. In the Tudor world, silence was powerful, and his silence spoke loudly. Mary must have felt the loneliness of that silence. To carry children under the shadow of a king, yet receive no protection from his name, it was a quiet kind of heartbreak. Still, life at court continued. And while Mary lived inside this fragile arrangement, someone else was watching closely. Anne Boleyn had learned from her sister's path. She had seen the pattern, the king's fascination, the slow fading of attention, the way a woman could rise quickly and fall just as fast. Anne decided she would not follow that road. When Henry turned his gaze toward her, she did something unexpected. She stepped back. She refused to become another hidden companion. She would not be a mistress. She would not give herself without a crown. Henry was not used to refusal. What began as curiosity turned into desire. What began as desire turned into obsession. Anne's distance made her more powerful than Mary had ever been. The king wanted what he could not easily have. And slowly, almost painfully, Mary felt the change. The visits became less frequent, the laughter softer, the gifts fewer, the letters stopped altogether. At court, shifts in favor are like changes in the wind. You can feel them before you see them. Conversations pause when you approach. Eyes no longer follow you. Invitations disappear. Mary felt it in her bones. The same people who once admired her now turned their attention elsewhere. Where once she had been surrounded by quiet envy, she now walked through silence. It is a strange feeling to be replaced while still standing in the same room. Anne's rise was steady, intentional. She understood that power required control. She held the king at a distance, making him prove his devotion in ways he had never done before. And Mary watched. Perhaps there was hurt, perhaps there was jealousy, or perhaps there was only exhaustion, the kind that comes from realizing you were never meant to win the game in the first place. In Tudor England, yesterday's favorite became today's memory. Mary had once been at the center of the king's attention. Now she stood at the edge of it. The fire that had once warmed her now burned elsewhere. But beneath the political shift was something deeper, a human ache. Had Henry ever truly cared for her? Had their quiet moments meant anything? Or had she simply been part of a larger design, a step toward something greater for her family? History does not give clear answers. What it shows instead is a young woman caught between emotion and ambition, between hope and strategy, between love and usefulness. The court glittered as brightly as ever. Music still played. Candles still burned late into the night. But for Mary, the light had changed. She had been the beginning of a story that was moving beyond her. And as Anne stepped closer to the throne, Mary stood still, no longer the king's chosen companion, no longer the center of whispered conversations. Just a sister, just a memory. And perhaps in the quiet of her own heart she began to understand the truth. In the world of kings, love rarely belongs to the one who feels it most. Rain falls softly against a narrow window. The sound is steady, almost calming, but beneath it lies a sense of unease, the kind that comes before something breaks. Far from the center of attention now, Mary Boleyn watched as the world she once knew changed in ways no one could have imagined. At the center of that change stood her sister, Anne Boleyn. Anne had done what Mary never tried to do. She refused the king. She denied him the easy affection he was used to receiving. She did not allow herself to become another hidden woman in shadowed rooms. Instead, she demanded something far greater: marriage, legitimacy, a crown. And for her, the king was willing to tear apart a kingdom. Henry VIII had always been strong-willed, but his desire for Anne became something deeper, something almost unstoppable. When the church refused to grant him the freedom to marry her, he made a choice that shocked all of Europe. He broke from the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, changing the course of England's history forever. Churches, laws, and loyalties shifted. Men argued in halls and chapels. Priests whispered in fear. Ordinary people did not fully understand what was happening, only that the ground beneath their lives was moving. And all of it in some way led back to Anne. Mary watched this from the background, no longer a figure of importance at court. The halls that once welcomed her now felt distant, almost unfamiliar. Servants who once bowed deeply now barely noticed her. The world had turned its gaze to her sister. Anne wore silk and jewels now, the weight of a crown resting on her head. She stood beside the king in ceremonies and celebrations, her face calm but her eyes always alert. Queenship was not safety. It was a position balanced on a blade. Mary must have felt many things as she watched. Perhaps pride, for the sister she had once laughed with as a child. Perhaps sadness for the distance growing between them. Or perhaps something quieter, the understanding that their lives were moving in completely different directions. But while Anne's life rose higher into danger and glory, Mary made a choice that surprised everyone. She fell in love, not with a king, not with a nobleman seeking power, but with a man named William Stafford, a man of modest status without great wealth or titles. He could not offer her influence or protection. He could only offer something rare at court: sincerity, and Mary chose him. They married in secret, knowing the reaction it would bring, and when the truth emerged, it came like a storm. The Boleyn family was furious. Such a marriage, they believed, damaged their standing. It was reckless, disobedient, unforgivable. Even Anne, now queen, could not protect her sister from the anger of their powerful relatives. Mary was pushed away from court. No royal favor, no comfortable life among silk and candlelight, no protection from powerful allies. She was sent away, left to build a life far from the glittering world she had once known. It was a harsh fall, but it was also a strange kind of freedom. Life outside the court was not easy. There were struggles, worries, and uncertainties. But there was also something she had never truly known before: peace. No whispers behind her back, no dangerous smiles, no feeling that every word or glance carried hidden meaning. For the first time in years, Mary lived a life that belonged to her. Meanwhile, at court, the air grew darker. Anne's position, once so powerful, became fragile. The king's attention, once devoted, began to shift again. Rumors spread. Accusations formed. Enemies gathered quietly, waiting for the moment to strike. Then, in 1536, the unthinkable happened. Anne Boleyn was arrested. The charges were shocking: treason, betrayal, crimes so serious that they seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet in the dangerous world of Tudor politics, truth often mattered less than power. The trial moved quickly, too quickly, and soon the sentence was passed. At the Tower of London, where so many lives had ended in silence and fear, Anne Boleyn faced her final days. Once the most powerful woman in England, she now walked the same cold stone corridors as prisoners before her. On a grey morning, the execution took place. The crowd was quiet. The air was heavy. And in a single moment, the woman who had changed a kingdom was gone. Mary was not there. Far from the court, far from the towers and the crowds, she heard the news as a distant echo. Perhaps she stood in silence for a long time. Perhaps memories came rushing back: childhood laughter, whispered secrets, the days when they were simply sisters, not rivals in history. Grief can feel strange when distance separates you from the moment of loss. There is no final farewell, no last glance, only the quiet understanding that someone who once filled your world is now gone forever. Anne's rise had been brilliant. Her fall had been swift. And Mary remained not a queen, not a mistress, not a figure of power. Just a woman living quietly, watching history unfold from afar. It is easy to believe that survival is simple, but survival carries its own weight. To live on while others fall, to remember what others forget, to carry memories that history no longer speaks of, these things leave their own marks on the heart. As the rain continued to fall against the window, one question lingered in the silence, unanswered and haunting. Was Mary the unlucky sister who lost everything? Or the one who escaped before the blade fell? The wind moves gently across an open field. There are no palace walls here, no guards, no whispers hiding behind silk sleeves. Only tall grass bending under a wide English sky. This is where Mary Boleyn lived out the rest of her days. Far from the glittering danger of the Tudor court, far from the heavy doors of the Tower of London, Mary's life became quiet. Simple, almost invisible. And history, as it often does, turned its attention elsewhere. Her sister Anne Boleyn would never be forgotten. Her name would be studied in books, painted in portraits, debated for centuries. People would argue about her ambition, her innocence, her downfall. She would become a symbol of love, of power, of tragedy. But Mary's name faded like ink left too long in the sun. After her marriage to William Stafford, Mary stepped fully into a different world. There were no royal banquets waiting for her, no jeweled gowns, no king calling her name in crowded halls. Instead, there were small routines. Mornings that began with simple tasks, evenings that ended without fear of political plots, the sound of children's laughter instead of court musicians, the smell of earth instead of perfume and candle wax. It was not a grand life. It was not powerful, but it was real. Mary had once stood close to one of the most powerful men in Europe, Henry VIII. She had felt the heat of his attention. She had seen how quickly favor could lift a family and how quickly it could destroy one. She had watched her sister rise higher than anyone thought possible, and she had watched her fall with terrifying speed. She had seen how love, when mixed with ambition, could tear apart a kingdom, and she had stepped away. Some might call her foolish. They might say she wasted her chance at greatness, that she lacked the fire her sister possessed, that she accepted too little. But what if she understood something others did not? Power in the Tudor world was never gentle. It demanded loyalty, obedience, and sacrifice. It rewarded ambition, but only for a time. And when it turned against you, it did so without mercy. Mary had lived long enough at court to know this truth. When Anne was executed in 1536, the shock rippled through England. A queen had fallen. A crown had rolled in the dust. And the man who once promised devotion moved on quickly, as if grief were only a passing inconvenience. Henry remarried within weeks, the world kept spinning, and Mary remained outside it all. There is something haunting about being forgotten. It can feel like erasure, like a life reduced to a footnote. But it can also be protection. When history forgets you, it stops hunting you. It stops demanding your blood for its pages. Mary did not die on a scaffold. She did not kneel before a crowd waiting for steel to fall. She did not have her final moments recorded in dramatic detail. She simply lived. Years passed quietly. Children grew, seasons changed. The world beyond her fields continued its battles for power and faith, shaped by decisions made during her youth. The break from the Roman Catholic Church had altered England forever. But Mary watched those changes from a distance, no longer caught in their center. Imagine her sometimes pausing in the evening light, the sky turning orange, the air cool. Perhaps she thought of her younger self, the girl walking through candlelit halls, unsure of what lay ahead. Perhaps she remembered the king's laughter, her sister's sharp smile, the feeling of standing on the edge of something dangerous and dazzling, and perhaps she felt something close to relief, because survival is its own quiet victory. Mary Boleyn's story does not end in glory. It does not end in scandal or spectacle. It ends in ordinary